2026 is going to be an awesome year. We got some pretty cool stuff coming up. First off, we got Foundations of Recovery. This is our flagship program. We're starting it in January.
This is for anyone, man, woman, or couple who wants to come and reclaim their heart from shame, trauma, and betrayal. We start off with an education on all sorts of principles, give you the common language. We feed you from a fire hose in terms of all things recovery.
It is such a great start to recovery. And we get at the roots of things, Tyler. This isn't like any other program. Like, this is our healing journey in process, and Foundations is where we begin.
If you look at the value that you're getting there to kick off a good recovery with all of the right education, all of the right language, and a team to get you started while also being directed by Brannon and myself through the whole process, what a deal.
So if you're interested, if you're struggling, if you've been wanting to do something for a long time, jump into this. This only comes around every so often, and we would love to have you there.
Click the link in the description to sign up for it. And to make it even sweeter, we're also including a raffle for a free pass to the Radiant Dawn retreat. Anyone who signs up for Foundations will be added to the raffle for that free Radiant Dawn pass. If you're a man and you sign up for Foundations, your name still gets entered, and you can give that pass away if you win it to any woman that you want to.
So what you're saying, Tyler, is if you sign up and participate in Foundations, you could possibly go to Radiant Dawn for free?
That's exactly what I'm saying, which is crazy because Foundations by itself is already an insane value.
Man, I sound so salesy. But it actually is awesome. So come to Foundations. And even if you don't come to Foundations, sign up for Radiant Dawn. It's beyond therapy, the best healing experiences that you can have.
Click the link below and come join us. How does leaning into my emotions help my recovery? Welcome to the Therapy Brothers podcast.
I'm Brannon.
I'm Tyler.
We're brothers.
We're therapists.
And we know recovery.
Bring your stories, your questions, your successes with real recovery.
Hey, Tyler, you ready to have some hard conversations?
Let's do it.
Let the Therapy Brothers podcast begin. Hey, Tyler.
Brannon, what's going on, man?
Not much, dude. Look what you're wearing today.
Hey, I'm riding for the brand today. I'm wearing the Rising Sun staff shirt from the last...
Hey, check it out.
You're wearing the old one like 4 years ago.
This is the best one.
That's the worst Rising Sun t-shirt that we've done so far.
Oh my gosh. The material of it, like this one fits well. Like is that the one that says staff on the back?
This one is smooth to the skin. It fits well. It's got the great logo on the front, and it has the best back. Look at that.
Yeah. So everywhere you go, people come up to you like, "Excuse me, sir, can you help me?" Like,
hey,
I've had so many people like, "Does that say staff on your back?"
Yeah, like, I'm staff at the Rising Sun.
Yeah, but they're like, when I'm at Costco, they're like, "Oh, staff, sweet."
I think the best shirt that we've had so far is the one that has like the fractured sphere with the light coming through it on the back. That's the best shirt.
I think you like the periwinkle and salmon, like. Knowing you, that was your favorite.
We've I've been made fun of for those colors before, I think, actually. So, no, actually, though, it is something. It's funny that we both wore the same shirt today and didn't even really notice it or plan on it, because that's the thing that's probably on both of our minds. We're about, what are we? Just a little bit over a month out, from the Rising Sun retreat, which is something that we love, and we would love to see anybody there that wants to come. So if you're interested, I think we're on the last couple days of our giveaway. If you share any episode of the Therapy Brothers podcast and then take a screenshot of your share, whether that's on social media or with a specific individual from your contacts or your whole contact list, every one of those shares is an entry for the free giveaway. If not, go to risingsun.org, risingsunson.org, and you can see what it's about. Sign up, come hang out with us in Bear Lake, Utah.
I just want to say, like, if you're on the fence and, if you're bumping along and just like wanting to shift some things, wanting to get some answers, some clarity, create some connection, like just do something different in your life. This is the thing that will jar you. It will wake you up. It will push you. just take the leap. Tyler, I don't know. Have you ever heard of anybody who's come who has regretted coming and spending the money and taking the time?
I've never talked to anybody.
Yeah.
Most of what we get, honestly, is like comments like, "Hey, I've been in therapy for 5 years, and this one weekend did more for me than the whole 5 years of therapy."
Yeah,
That
things
kind of
like I
stuff.
never expected that or saw that coming, what I actually got from this. This changes everything for me. So that those are the type of things that happen there, and it's beautiful. I think it's sacred, and we're blessed to be a part of it, and we would love you to come be a part of it with us. So please, if you feel that call to do it, listen to it and come because we want you there. So.
Amen.
All right. Well, we have an old guest on the show today,
This is from a
Tyler.
long time ago, Brannon.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, several years ago.
and my memory doesn't serve me well, so I'll have to catch up a little bit because it's been a little while. But we got Claire Jones back on the show. Claire, welcome back.
Thank you. It has been a while. It's been a couple of years, but I was on a few times. I am about, 3.5, almost 4 years into recovery now from addiction with sex and love addiction. And old episodes talk about it. But I am doing well. And really within the last 6 months, I've made a lot of progress in getting some stability in my recovery. But have some things I've been doing a lot of emotion work and wanted to ask some questions about that.
That's awesome. We love to talk about emotions. So
We're happy that you're making progress in your recovery too. That's awesome to hear.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So fill us in, Claire. What are you doing? What are the questions you have about emotions? And what are you learning?
Okay. So I'll give you a background on where I'm coming from with this. So a couple of years ago, I spent some time at the Meadows Treatment Center. And the first thing they did when I got there was introduce me to the emotion chart. And the one they use it was created by Pia Melody. And what she did was group all of the emotions into 8 major emotion groups. And this was extremely helpful for me who has very little understanding or context for emotions because those were scary, something that we just shoved away. And so in this chart, she lists the 8 major emotion groups, and then there's a column for how they feel in the body to help kind of identify that. And then there's another column that lists the gift that each of these emotions give. And as I've used this, it's really been an eye-opening experience, and I've come to see my emotions as superpowers. And they're things that can tell me about myself and my world and the people around me in ways that are extremely helpful for helping me navigate the world. And so the first one that I became familiar with was the emotion group of pain, which includes sadness and grief and hurt. And so what was interesting about that one was I noticed that most of us are familiar with physical pain. And when you get an injury, your body sends out the pain signals, and it's often accompanied by tears if it's something significant. And it's a sign to your body that you need to address that wound and you need to tend and care for it. And what became apparent was that there's not just physical wounds, there's emotional and spiritual wounds too. And so when I'd be sitting in my group therapy or in individual therapy, and someone would say something and it would elicit tears, that was a sign for me to stop. And often the therapist started doing this first and would say, "Hey, what's coming up for you?" And you guys probably do this too. And it was a sign that there was a wound there around something that was said that brought that emotion up. And so after a while, it became very helpful for me to notice when I would start to cry that I could do my own work around finding what the wound is and then doing work to tend and care for that. And that's been very helpful in healing some of the childhood wounds and things. Then the next emotion that I became familiar with was anger. And I know you recently had someone on here that talked about anger. And this one was very helpful in helping me determine what my boundaries and my values were, because that's what anger does. Anger tells me, hey, your boundaries are being violated or your values are being disrespected. And for a long time, I would just let people run all over me. And that led to, in a lot of abusive relationships with my father and boyfriends and husbands and things like that. And so the anger became very helpful and the gift of anger is that it gives you strength and energy to protect yourself when you need to, right? And so I started to use the anger not just for protection, but also to dig deeper. So I'm feeling angry. Why am I feeling angry? And then I was able to identify a lot of personal values that I had. So, like when I see someone being disrespected or treated mean, that makes me angry, and it tells me that I've got internal values around kindness and respect and individual worth and things like that. If I get lied to, that makes me angry, things like that. And then I tied it into the next two emotions were grief and shame. And these are the ones that I have, especially shame, have questions around. So anger tells me when my values are being disrespected or my boundaries are being broken. And then grief tells me when guilt. Guilt tells me when I'm breaking my own boundaries and when my own values I'm disrespecting my own values. And then shame tells me, I want to qualify this is the family of shame. So it also includes embarrassment and disgust and the shame emotions. But it can tell me that I'm breaking someone else's boundaries or values. But we have to be careful with these because all three of these emotions have something called carried emotion. And that's when someone else puts their guilt and shame on me and says, hey, you should feel shame for this, or you should feel guilty for this. And then that carried emotion is what really drives a lot of addiction problems and has done so for me. And so being able to navigate what emotions are internal to me and what is carried has been hugely helpful. And so one of the tools that my therapist taught me was that internal guilt and shame is tolerable. It's something that I can digest, I can process, but the carried emotion, the external emotions, are not tolerable. And so when I'm feeling flooded with shame or shut down, then I know, hey, this probably isn't coming from me. Where is it coming from? And what is the messaging? And then when I do my self-shame resiliency, I can then let that go. I don't have to feel other people's shame. I don't have to feel other people's guilt. And that's extremely beneficial for me because the internal emotions of guilt and shame, those keep me in containment. So I'll give an experience here. So early on in recovery, my husband would respond with anger a lot. Everything was about the addiction and the affairs and that kind of stuff would be met with a lot of anger. And this would shut me down. It would trigger some PTSD from my childhood and things like that. And so it was really difficult to make any progress with communication and resolving some of the emotions around the affairs and the addiction. And then one day, we were having a check-in, and I had admitted that I had been tempted to look up one of my old qualifiers on social media. And he looked at me and in a very authentic and sincere way said, please don't, that would really hurt my feelings. And that statement then created an opportunity for me to tie into my values of respect and kindness for my husband. And so every time I would have that thought to look up one of my old qualifiers, that then became the first thought that entered into my mind was, this would hurt your husband. And that helped a lot with containment. And I've noticed it in other circumstances where I've had those temptations to fall back into old behavior. And so it was a huge game changer to tap into that. And I've had these conversations with my husband since, is that what's very helpful is for you to meet me with your emotions and your vulnerability around some of my values, because that helps keep me in containment. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It makes a ton of sense to me. I appreciate you sharing this. Number one, I can relate to you 100% on what you're saying. It was the kinds of things in climbing out of my own hole, like with my wife, where her anger was a lot harder for me to hold because it would hit my shame. And then I have to climb through my shame to get to what was beneath her anger. And that was hard to do. But when the few moments when she was able to go below her anger and share the pain kinds of emotions, that was something that hit all of my value system in a different way. That was like, whoa, what my choices have a bigger impact on other people than I think they do. And this person that I now love, I'm directly causing all of those painful kinds of emotions. And that made it easier for me to then go into myself and go, I don't want to do that. Like, that's not who I want to be or who I am. So it makes total sense to me. I'd like maybe for you, Claire, to just explain for our audience what you mean by the word containment, because people are probably not understanding what you're meaning when you say with helping me with containment.
So the way I view containment is just stopping my acting out. And so if I've primarily struggled a lot with the love addiction, which is flirting and acting out with other men, and looking for emotional connection and intrigue, romantic intrigue, that kind of stuff. And so containment is where I can put a boundary up and not seek for that outside of the marriage, and be able to contain that behavior, because it's aligning with my values. Is that accurate?
Yeah, exactly. So if I hear what you're saying, another way of saying that would be, the more that I lean into understanding what's actually going on inside of me, instead of running from it or trying to numb it or get rid of it, the more that I actually learn to understand it and meet it with curiosity, kindness, and compassion, the less I need to act out of those emotions.
Yeah. And then I had another experience as it relates to shame. And this one I'm still kind of trying to process through. And so I have been raised in an environment that basically had a lot of underlying messaging that sex is bad. And that carried shame around anything sexual. But at the same time, I was getting messaging that well, if it's within your marriage, then it's fine. But then there was mixed messaging, which I think a lot of people have that issue. And so I had this experience a little while ago where I had this compulsive, I'm trying to think how to tie this in. I had this compulsive desire to look at porn. And this was a little bit unique because that pornography hasn't generally been a part of my addictive process. And so this surprised me when this hit. And so I'm scrolling through some of these images and I'm asking myself, so why do you want to look at this? Why is this so compelling? And I got an answer right away that said, well, look at what you're looking at. And so I moved that whole experience from my emotional brain into my intellectual brain and started analyzing what I was searching and what I was looking at. And it immediately hit me that I was trying to process through traumatic events around sexuality from my childhood. And so I could see this search was this experience when I was 11, and this search was when I was 14, and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And as I analyzed it, I became aware that the biggest trauma from my childhood wasn't one single experience. It was being exposed to intense and graphic sexual imagery and experiences and not being given any context through which to process it. So essentially it was neglect. And so then I thought, well, I'm an adult now. Maybe I need to come up with a context in which to process all of this. And then that process of going through, so I talked through, okay, and some of your guys' messaging influenced these conversations with myself. So the first one is, I'm a sexual being. My sexuality was given to me by the God that made me, and it has a purpose. And I came up with 3 things that I see as important to me in my life around that. And the first one is sex, of course, makes babies. The second is it fosters connection with other people. And the third is just pleasure. And it's for me to experience that. And so then I walked through and I'm like, okay, so with the babies, I had decided a long time ago that I was going to create a nest, catch any babies that might be created from sex, right? And so I've done that, and I've been that fits with my values and everything. But then the second one, it's this connection with other people that gets very messy because sex is much bigger than just intercourse. Sexuality, as we live in our communities with each other, we bump into each other's sexuality all the time. It comes out in the way that we talk to each other and the way that we look at each other, the way that we touch each other, all of that. And that's why every workplace has a sexual harassment policy, right? And so when I'm feeling lonely and disconnected in my marriage, then it becomes very difficult to not reach out for connection to other people. And this is where I get kind of, I'm trying to work out. So any insight that you guys have would be appreciated.
Yeah, if I can comment to this.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your vulnerability in talking about this, and you're not alone at all in these feelings. But what's interesting is the same principle applies to sexuality as it does to emotions. In that, are emotions good or bad? I mean, they're all there to protect you. Is sexuality good or bad? The thing about sex or emotions, without them, we wouldn't exist. So we need both. Very important, right? But also, they can create all kinds of destruction and get out of control. And so the word containment. I don't love the word containment when it comes to emotions and sex. I like the word harness, because containment has somewhat of a connotation of like negativity, of like, we got to contain this. This is, but when you have emotion or you have sexuality, this is just energy inside of you. We've put words to all of it. We've named it anger, we've named it grief, we've named it sex, but it's energy inside of you. And if we have certain experiences as children, we start to label that energy as good or bad. That's okay, that's not okay. And so when that energy comes up and we've labeled it as bad, then we've attached shame to that energy, whether it's sexuality, whether it's emotions. And once we attach that shame to that energy, now we're starting to spin off into rejecting it, fighting against it, giving it more power. We go into limbic and we just start to respond to this energy in a way where we indulge, or we try to shut it down. And we can use the word containment, because with that, if we can stop and get mindful and neutrally look at this, and I love what you're saying, Claire, through a neutral lens, and I would even take it further than neutral. I would say through a compassionate lens, stop and look at it, then we can harness it for exactly what we want it to be.
Yeah.
Does that make sense with like sex, like what you're
Yes.
talking about?
And where I've gone with this, so I have taken this as removing the label of good or bad or right or wrong from sex itself. And then because the shame, when that carried shame comes in around the sexuality, we, like you say, we push it away. And when you're pushing something away, you don't have control over it.
Yeah.
It's not until you embrace it that then you have control, and you can get control over it. And that's been a very helpful thing for me to process as well. If I'm pushing this away because I'm scared of it, or I feel bad about it, or I think it's wrong, then I don't have any control over it.
Blair, what you just said, though, a lot of people, it's really hard to grasp, to understand, because we're taught the opposite with our emotions and with our sexuality, is control it, shut it down, good or bad. And so when you take the leap of, I'm not gonna look at sex through a lens of good or bad, or I'm not gonna look at anger through a lens of good or bad, or whatever we're talking about here, that goes against so much of the programming that we've been given. And it almost is scary to actually let yourself go that far with that belief. Do you see what I'm saying?
It is terrifying. And it's like, I've had this conversation with my husband recently, and it's been terrifying for him to hear me say some of this stuff, because he is still in that control. Sex is bad. It needs to be controlled. It needs to be harnessed and all of that stuff. But the more that I have to say this,
Claire, can I just add, the way to harness it is what you're saying, is to accept it, is to know it, is to see it.
Exactly.
Right?
And then when I put it in with my other value system that I've been working on, and this is where I've gone with my husband, is like, I still have values around monogamy and fidelity in marriage. Just because I don't have a moral judgment on people having sex with each other outside of maybe my own moral values, doesn't mean I'm going to go run off and then start acting out with all these other men.
Your values still exist, even if you don't operate from a place of force and control and shame.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's been such a freeing experience to come to that realization and not have that weight of having to carry anyone else's shame or guilt around any of this stuff. I can have my own, and that's why I keep talking about the internal emotions. These are my values, and they may not match up with other, even some of my religious teachings. They don't match up with that, and that's okay. I still have my values. I'm going to act in my integrity, and that's been the biggest one. Like I say, is just not having to carry anyone else's judgments or pressure. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
I love where you're going here, Claire. I maybe just add to what Brannon and you are saying a little bit as to why I think people are so afraid, especially in recovery, of their own emotions. I think what you're doing a really good job of is illustrating how emotions work, and how emotions work is they elicit some, like, I'm just looking at the 8 basic emotions chart that you were referencing earlier, and they elicit some kind of a physiological response in the body that then tells us we need to do something with it. And it's the doing of the emotion that often gets us into the trouble that we worry about, the loss of containment or whatever else you're talking about. And for most of us, we try to run from those emotions that Brannon was talking about, have been designated as bad. So fear, all the fear, pain, shame, guilt, those 4 that are on that chart there. Those are all things, if you ask most people, they'll be like, those are bad emotions. When in reality, those are no worse emotions than joy, passion, love. They're all just emotions. And those emotions come with a naturally built-in action that goes with them. And most of us don't realize that we still have a choice to recognize an emotion and not actually take the action that comes paired with it. And
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead and finish.
Okay, I was going to say the way that you actually take, in essence, control of your addiction, because addiction is a mismanagement of emotion to where you're acting outside of it all the time, is to get to know those emotions so well that you, just like Viktor Frankl says, you expand the space in which you now have the stimulus of the emotion and the choice of the response, and knowing your emotions, and then having the recognition of those emotions, and then laying your values over the top of it, moves it from a good or bad kind of a thing to what's going to be most effective with what I'm feeling right now. Choice.
Well, exactly. And every emotion should have a response to it. But the response is something that I get to choose, right? And
That's
it may
right.
not be what is immediately apparent. So if I'm feeling anger and I can identify where the anger is coming from, then like I can say someone is crossing my boundary, I can then analyze, do I need to do something about this, or can I let it go? And then that it empowers me to make that choice. But if I disregard that, and especially like fear, if I throw that out and I don't honor that, then I'm dishonoring myself by not paying those emotions the attention that they need, because they're there for a reason. And sometimes where they're coming from it needs some thought process around to find out, because sometimes it's being triggered by something that's not accurate, especially if you're dealing with past traumas and things that are coming from childhood and they're not actually threats in the present. But yeah, it empowers me then to make a choice around that emotion. And if I disregard or push it away, then it's just getting stored in my body, and then it will come out in other ways. But if I can honor it and identify it, then I can process it and I can digest it, and it doesn't come back to haunt me, I guess.
All emotions and sexual feelings are just some windows into who we actually are. And they're indicators of that. But we stop short of getting there. We don't like we don't go far enough to understand that. And we throw a judgment on those things. And to be a conscious, powerful human being, do we get there through self-rejection or through self-acceptance? What do you think, Tyler?
You already know the answer, Brad. Of course, it's through self-acceptance. I actually believe that radical self-acceptance is the key to the happiest life.
What you just said is so true. And yet, most people actually believe the other. They live in the other narrative.
They live in the narrative of the world telling you you're not enough.
Yeah, if I feel anger as a woman, we talked about that last week, I shouldn't. If I feel these sexual feelings, I'm bad. If I feel we're constantly self-rejecting and trying to get ourselves in the box of what I should be so that I can have acceptance in the society and world that I live in. And then we lose our power. We live in fear. We live in force and control, and we lose our power. And everything Claire's talking about is, and addiction, by the way, is like the ultimate example of that. Because eventually you're just numbing your life out because you're self-rejecting so much. And everything Claire's talking about is the recipe for stopping and, one, loving yourself, but also knowing yourself and stepping into your power. I love everything that you're saying, Claire, and I can hear the work that you're doing. You're doing the right kind of work in your recovery, and it's really beautiful. And it's a process of self-discovery, right? And self-acceptance.
And I want to add another thing in here that's come out that you guys have talked about before as it relates to shame and sex. And you guys talked about the arousal template and how we don't always control what's on that. There's things that show up there that are way outside of our value system, that are even can be disgusting to us. But we don't have to act on that. And when I can come to, and this is conversations with my husband too, like I can acknowledge that that's there, because there are things on that in the addiction world, my addiction experiences, I'm trying to think how to word this, but when I take the judgment out of that and just acknowledge that it's there, but if I'm acting in my values, that then doesn't become something that I have to shame myself over, or
you can get to know yourself.
Yeah, and again, it's accepting that's there. Then you get control, and I'm trying to think of how this, because it can get really, you can really do a lot of deep work with that can be very scary. When you step into that realm of accepting things about yourself and the darkness and the possibilities that you're capable of doing, and acknowledging and accepting that that's there, can be terrifying. But when you do accept it, like we've been saying, then you can make choices around it, and it isn't, and the fear then tends to go away around it.
That's right. It kind of, what you're saying is, it sounds a lot like the Carl Jung shadow work or the IFS parts work, where accepting that part of you doesn't mean acting out in that part of you. It means knowing that part of you, understanding what's driving it, understanding what's behind it, and then still being the person who gets to make the choice, because that part isn't quite as loud, because in a sense, the acceptance and validation that it's there unburdens it. And then it doesn't want to go and act out of the container, so to speak, as much, because it doesn't feel threatened. It doesn't feel like you're trying to kill it. It doesn't feel like it's, not being heard or seen. And it's just like any of us, once we've been understood and feel like we've been heard, we instantly have our own physiology come down and feel like, okay, like I've been validated.
Yeah. And I'll give one more emotion that I had no concept of when I first started this work, and that's love. And we were asked to paint all of our emotions in the treatment center. And I painted all of them, but I could not figure out what love was or how that felt or anything. And it's just been within the last 6 months that I've started to understand that. And love, the gift of love is connection. And so that's become very helpful in when I'm feeling connected to my spouse. That's when I know, oh, I'm feeling love. And that sounds really basic, maybe, but growing up in a environment where love was scary and not shown at all, with a lot of neglect, it's no wonder that I don't have any concept of what that is. And when I was trying to explain this to my husband, he got a little bit offended, like, what, you don't love me? And I just had to explain, no, it's not that I don't love you. All of the actions that I do for you around that show that that love's there. I just don't know how to feel it. Um, and so I think there's, I do have some, you guys have called it alexithymia, where you have difficulty feeling or processing emotions. And so this is partly why that emotion work has been so important for me, is because I've had to go back and be that child that's learning about herself and her emotions and who she is as a person. But it's been so healing, and you're never too old to do that. I'm just celebrated my 53rd birthday.
Happy birthday.
I love it.
Thank you.
I love it. Claire, I love what you're saying too. I just going off of the PMLity chart that you've been referencing this whole time. It's interesting to me that the gift of love, which to me is the most sustainable energy for a wholehearted recovery, that's the lifeblood of recovery, is cultivating love in all of its forms. She puts down the gifts of those things as connection, life, and spirituality. And I tend to agree with those things. That's what wholehearted recovery is a life where you're having connection. You see the vibrance in life in all of its forms, both positive and negative, and you can live because you trust yourself to manage your emotions with life as it comes. And then it's interesting that spirituality, according to PMLity here, it runs through love, which lines itself up really well with the Christian perspective of God being love as well. It's beautiful.
I love, speaking of love, I love what I've heard today. Claire, you're awesome, and talk about willing to do your work. A lot of this, simply put, comes down to like just observation and curiosity and just getting to know yourself. And that's what I see you doing through all of the addiction, through all of the pain that you've been through. It really is. Tyler and I talk about all the time that through your wounds is where the light enters. And I see you taking an opportunity to allow it to enter because you've been through so much. And I really appreciate your example of somebody who's willing to observe non-judgmentally and get curious with yourself. And that's what recovery is. That's what recovery is all about. So thank you for coming on today. Really appreciate you coming back.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to have this conversation with me.
Yeah, we would love to. Just before we started recording, you mentioned that your husband might be willing to come on with you, and we would love to have you guys come on as a couple sometime and continue to see and hear and be a part of the journey that you guys are on. It's really awesome, and you've come and offered a gift today, Claire. So thank you.
Yes, we would be happy to do that. Thanks.
Yeah.
So I want to share one quote or one comment that was made on YouTube, and it says, "This is a really important topic, and Claire is very brave to show up and discuss this. Owning emotions and talking about anger is so beneficial." So already we're getting feedback from people saying thank you. And if this was helpful, please share it, and please leave a review, and you can thank Claire in a review. And until next time, keep on keeping on.